For more of this kind of content, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. The stars shimmered like shards of broken glass against the velvet expanse of space. The small, sleek medical vessel cut through the void, its destination looming ahead, Zephirion, the jewel of the Ardent sector. Dr. Michael Carter leaned against the viewport, watching as the palace came into view, a sprawling fortress of silver and crystal, its spires cut through the sky like celestial daggers. The planet's 3 moons bathed it in an eerie glow, adding to the mystique of the world he had been summoned to. Summoned. The word itself irritated him. Michael was no servant, no mercenary doctor for hire. Yet, the urgency of the request, no. The command had been impossible to ignore. The Zephirion High Council had sent their fastest cruiser to retrieve him, no explanation given other than a cryptic transmission. The princess suffers. You are the only one who can save her. Zephirians were an advanced race, boasting technology far beyond that of Earth's. Yet their medical sciences were primitive in one crucial area. They lacked the ability to regenerate damaged tissue. Their bodies, for all their strength and beauty, were cursed with wounds that festered, infections that spread, and scars that never faded. Michael knew his own abilities well. His touch could heal not in the way of magic, but through bio-accelerated therapy, a fusion of Earth's most cutting-edge medical advancements and his own unique, gifted hands. The moment he stepped off the transport, he was met with suspicion. Zephirion guards, their blue skin glistening under the artificial lights, surrounded him. Their golden armor hummed with latent energy, their eyes sharp as daggers. "Follow," one of them barked, offering no further words. Michael smirked, rolling his shoulders before falling into step behind them. He had faced warlords, mercenary kings, and crime syndicates before what was one frightened royal family. The grand hall was as breathtaking as it was cold. Tall, crystalline pillars lined the throne room, glowing softly as if alive. The air smelled of exotic incense, laced with something metallic, the scent of blood. And there she was, Princess Ella. Michael's breath hitched for just a fraction of a second, long enough to take her in. The rumors did not do her justice. She was breathtaking, an ethereal beauty wrapped in silver silk that clung to her every curve. Her vibrant red hair cascaded over her shoulders like molten fire, her blue skin glowing under the ambient palace light. Her lips full, decadent, curved into a slight scowl as she gazed at him from her throne. Her sapphire eyes held defiance, but beneath it, something else lingered. Uncertainty. "I do not trust you," she said coolly. Michael chuckled, running a hand through his dark hair. "Charming. But you called me here, princess." Her fingers twitched against the armrest of her throne. She was gripping it too tightly, a sign of pain. "You are a human," she said, as if the very word disgusted her. "A creature who wields unnatural power with his hands." Michael exhaled, stepping closer. "It's called medicine, not witchcraft." Ella flinched, as if his mere presence threatened her. "And you expect me to allow you to lay those hands upon me?" Her words were venomous, but Michael didn't miss the slight tremor in her voice. She was afraid not of pain. No, it was something deeper. Michael's gaze flicked downward. The wound on her thigh was partially concealed beneath the folds of her silk dress, but he could see it, the deep gash, dark and swollen. Their technology had failed her. If she didn't let him treat her, she would suffer. He took a deliberate step forward, holding out his hands. "You summoned me because you know the truth. Without my touch, you will not heal." Ella stiffened. The guards around them tensed, but she lifted a single hand, stopping them. Her glare was sharp as a blade, her breath uneven. "You don't understand," she whispered. "For a Zephirion, to be touched by another is sacred." Michael smirked. "Then it's a good thing I'm not a Zephirion." Silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. For the first time, Princess Ella looked uncertain. For the first time, Michael felt the air shift between them, something far more dangerous than just a healing touch, something inevitable. The room was suffocatingly silent. The guards shifted uneasily, their hands hovering over their weapons, but none dared to speak. All eyes were on their princess, the untouchable, the divine, the one who had never allowed any being to lay hands upon her flesh. Yet here she was, caught in a silent war with the human standing before her. Michael held his ground, his dark eyes locked onto Ella's. "Princess, this is not a choice. If I don't treat you now, the infection will spread. Your technology has failed. You know it." Ella's throat worked as she swallowed. She was proud, regal, dominant in every way, and yet the idea of his touch of his hands against her skin made something inside her stir. She exhaled sharply and averted her gaze. "I will not allow you to disgrace me in front of my people." Her voice was softer now, but the weight of her words was still heavy. Michael studied her, then glanced at the guards, then clear the room. The guards immediately protested, their voices overlapping in outrage. "Silence," Ella commanded, her voice like steel. The room fell into immediate obedience. Her sapphire eyes met Michael's, a storm raging beneath them. She was on the verge of something, a decision she did not want to make. Finally, she nodded once. "Leave us," she ordered. The hesitation was thick, but no one dared defy her. One by one, the guards filed out, each sparing a final glance at Michael, their expressions filled with warning. The moment the doors sealed shut behind them, the tension in the room turned electric. Michael exhaled through his nose. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" Ella glared at him. "Do not push me, human." Michael suppressed a smirk. "Right, now, let me see the wound." Ella hesitated, then, with painstaking deliberation, loosened the folds of her silver silk. The fabric slipped, revealing her smooth, flawless blue skin. The wound was deep, an ugly gash along the curve of her upper thigh. It should have healed by now, but instead, the edges were darkened, inflamed, rejecting every attempt at Zephirion medical intervention. Michael dropped to one knee beside her, rolling up the sleeves of his black shirt. "This might sting." Ella inhaló bruscamente, mientras sus manos se encontraban justo encima de su piel. The warmth radiating from his fingers was unnatural. She wasn't used to this, to the presence of another's touch, so close to her body. Michael's fingers finally met her skin. A gasp escaped Ella's lips before she could stop it. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever felt. His hands, impossibly warm, sent an unfamiliar heat rolling through her. It wasn't painful. It was different, like the slow unraveling of something forbidden. Michael ignored the way her body tensed. His focus was on her wound, his hands steady. He pressed his fingertips gently over the torn flesh, activating the bio-accelerated healing process. A faint golden glow shimmered beneath his skin, seeping into hers. Ella bit her lip, trying to suppress the shiver that ran up her spine. She should hate this. She should fear it. But instead, she wanted more. Michael's touch was careful but firm, guiding the healing energy through her body. He felt her pulse quicken beneath his hands, the way her breath became uneven. He glanced up, catching the way her eyes darkened with something unspoken. "You're afraid," he murmured. Ella's lips parted slightly, but no words came. Michael smirked. "But not of the pain, are you?" A deep blush spread across her blue skin, making her glow even more under the palace lights. She turned her head away, her voice barely above a whisper. "You may continue." Michael's smirk widened. Oh, this was going to be interesting. Ella's heart pounded against her ribs, each beat a drum of warning, an alarm she refused to heed. Michael's hands worked over her wound with a confidence that both infuriated and intrigued her. She had never been touched like this before, not even by her own kind. Zephirion culture dictated that physical contact was an act of deep intimacy, reserved only for bonded mates. To feel the heat of a foreigner's skin against hers, to experience the tingling sensation that followed his every movement, it was almost too much to bear. Yet, she did not stop him. She could not. Michael kept his touch firm, but professional, ignoring the way her body shivered under his fingers. He had worked on countless patients before, warriors, mercenaries, soldiers who had suffered far worse than this. Yet, none of them had ever reacted the way Princess Ella did. Her breathing was unsteady. Her fingers twitched against the silk draped over her lap, clenching and unclenching as if fighting an invisible battle. "You're tense," he observed, his deep voice cutting through the silence. Ella snapped her gaze to him. "Of course, I'm tense. You are touching me in a way no one ever has before." Michael raised an eyebrow but didn't stop his work. "I'm healing you, not seducing you, princess." Her lips parted as if to rebuke him, but no words came. The warmth of his hands spread deeper into her wound, the golden glow of his healing ability pulsating against her blue skin. It was working. Her tissue was regenerating, knitting itself back together at an accelerated rate. She could feel it, the energy, the power sinking into her, filling her body with something unfamiliar, something she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. Her pulse quickened, Michael noticed. He looked up at her, his dark eyes meeting hers, and for the briefest of moments, the air between them changed. This was no longer just a medical procedure. Ella lamió sus labios, intentando calmarse. Your hands, they do not just heal, do they? Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper. Michael's smirk returned, slow and knowing. That depends. Do you want them to? A sharp knock on the chamber doors shattered the moment. Ella jerked back, her breath uneven. Enter, she commanded, her voice laced with more irritation than she intended. A Zephirion guard stepped inside, bowing low. Your Highness, the council demands an audience with you immediately. There are urgent matters at hand. Ella straightened, her royal composure snapping back into place. She glanced at Michael, her expression unreadable. You are finished? She asked. Michael ran a final sweep over the wound, then pulled back, rolling his sleeves down. You'll live, he said casually. Ella stood, pulling her silk robes over her thigh, as if sealing away whatever had just transpired between them. She walked toward the door, but hesitated just before crossing the threshold. She turned slightly, just enough to glance over her shoulder at him. You will remain here until I summon you again, she said. Michael chuckled. Careful, princess. That almost sounded like a request. She scoffed, but didn't deny it. And then she was gone. Michael exhaled slowly, running a hand through his dark hair. This mission was turning out to be far more interesting than he had anticipated. The palace was silent, but tension crackled in the air like a brewing storm. Michael sat alone in the vast guest quarters assigned to him, staring out at the sprawling cityscape of Zephirion, the capital of Zephirion. The twin moons cast their silver glow over the crystal towers, reflecting in his dark eyes. It had been 2 days since he last saw Princess Ella. 2 days since he had touched her. 2 days since something changed between them. He rolled his shoulders, pushing away the phantom sensation of her blue skin beneath his hands. He had done nothing but heal her. That was all. And yet, her expression haunted him, the way her body had tensed under his touch, the way her breath had hitched when he pressed against her wound. He had seen attraction before. He had felt desire from others. But never like that. Never with her. The chime of his door interrupted his thoughts. He turned, expecting one of the palace guards, but when the doors slid open, his stomach clenched. Princess Ella stood there, draped in silver silk, her red hair cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. The palace lights cast an ethereal glow over her blue skin, making her look like something out of a dream. Michael immediately sensed something was different. She was hesitant, not the fierce, unshakable royal he had first met, but a woman who was struggling with something she did not understand. Michael smirked slightly. Didn't expect you to come knocking, princess. Ella stepped inside, the doors sealing behind her. I did not knock, Michael chuckled. Fair point. She exhaled sharply, folding her arms over her chest. He noticed how her fingers twitched, small, nearly imperceptible, but enough for him to see that she was battling something within herself. I feel different, she admitted, her voice softer than usual. Michael arched an eyebrow. Different how? She hesitated before meeting his gaze. Since your touch, my body has not felt the same. It lingers like an imprint that I cannot erase. Michael's smirk faded. She was serious. He stepped closer, testing the air between them. She didn't move away. Are you saying that I left an impression? Ella narrowed her eyes. This is not amusing. Michael tilted his head. No, but it's fascinating. Your people don't heal the way we do. Maybe my abilities triggered something unexpected. Maybe it is not just the healing. Michael's breath hitched. Ella's sapphire eyes burned into his. She wasn't just talking about the energy that had repaired her wound. She was talking about something else, something far more dangerous. The space between them grew smaller, though neither moved. The tension coiled tighter, like a string pulled taut, threatening to snap. Ella levantó su mano por primera vez. She had been terrified of his touch before, but now she was the one reaching out. Her fingers traced along his jaw, down his throat, to the center of his chest, where his heartbeat thrummed beneath her touch. Michael inhaled sharply. Does this frighten you, human? She whispered. His lips curled into a slow smirk. Oh, she was playing a game now. Michael leaned in, just enough that their breaths mingled. Princess, he murmured, his voice deep and smooth. You have no idea what I could do to you. Ella's pulse fluttered against his fingers, betraying her, and then blaring alarm shattered the moment. Ella jerked back, her expression snapping to alertness. Michael immediately turned toward the sound, his instincts firing like a weapon. A voice echoed through the palace halls. Security breach. An intruder has entered the royal quarters. Protect the princess. Ella's eyes widened. Michael moved. In a single swift motion, He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the hidden corridor behind the chamber wall. "Come on, princess," he growled, adrenaline spiking. "Looks like I'm not done protecting you yet." Ella didn't resist, and for the first time, she didn't want to. The hidden corridors beneath the palace were tight, forcing Michael and Ella into close quarters as they moved swiftly through the passageways. The walls vibrated with the sounds of battle energy weapons discharging, shouts of palace guards, the distant hum of defensive shields activating. Someone had orchestrated this attack from the inside. Ella's breath was steady, but her grip on Michael's arm was firm, stronger than he had expected. Despite her royal demeanor, she was a warrior at heart. "Who would dare attack the palace?" Michael asked, keeping his voice low as they moved deeper into the tunnels. Ella's jaw tightened. "Only someone with knowledge of our defenses. This is not an ordinary assassination attempt." Michael exhaled through his nose. Of course. A sudden movement up ahead stopped them cold. A shadow shifted in the passageway, tall, imposing. The intruder. Michael instinctively stepped in front of Ella. He wasn't a soldier, he was a doctor, but that didn't mean he couldn't fight. The Zephirion rogue stepped into the dim light. His blue skin was dull, almost gray, his body covered in scars. His uniform was that of an elite warrior, but the insignia had been scratched away. Ella stiffened beside Michael. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He is supposed to be dead." Michael frowned, not the words he wanted to hear. The rogue's voice was gravelly, broken from years of battle. "Step aside, human. This is not your fight." Michael smirked. "Yeah? Well, it is now." The rogue lunged. Michael barely dodged the first strike, a curved energy blade that would have severed his throat if he had been a second slower. His reflexes, sharpened by his newfound connection to Zephirion's energy, kicked in. Ella moved in tandem with him. She summoned a surge of raw power, blue lightning crackling from her fingertips. The rogue countered with a defensive shield, deflecting her blast. Michael didn't hesitate. He moved in. With a sharp twist, he grabbed the rogue's wrist, forcing the blade down before driving his knee into his opponent's ribs. The rogue staggered, but didn't fall. Ella delivered the final blow, a precision strike to the warrior's temple, sending him crashing to the floor. Silence. Michael breathed hard, his muscles burning. He glanced at Ella. She looked unshaken. He exhaled. "Okay, who the hell was that?" Ella empujó el cuerpo inconsciente con su botín. "A dead man." Michael arched an eyebrow. "Could have fooled me." Ella's expression darkened. "Whoever sent him does not intend for me to live past tonight." Michael clenched his jaw. His instincts screamed at him. This was bigger than an assassination attempt. Something was coming, and he wasn't leaving her side. Ella met his gaze. "There is only one place where they cannot follow." Michael tilted his head. "And where's that?" She hesitated, then said the words that changed everything. "The bonding chamber." Michael exhaled. Something told him this was just the beginning. The hidden tunnels beneath the palace stretched on in eerie silence, their bioluminescent walls pulsing like a living entity. Michael followed Ella deeper into the labyrinth, the echoes of their rapid footsteps the only sound accompanying them. Above them, the palace was under siege. The council's betrayal had come swiftly, their assassins breaching the royal wing with surgical precision. Ella had fought them off with raw fury, but she knew more were coming. They weren't here just to overthrow her, they wanted to erase her bloodline completely. Michael still felt the electric pulse of the bonding chamber before he even saw it. The energy vibrated against his skin, sending a strange tingling sensation through his bones. His already heightened senses, a side effect of his unique human healing abilities, were now in overdrive. Ella came to a sudden stop, her hand pressing against an ornate door made of obsidian and crystalline veins. The symbols carved into its surface glowed softly at her touch, as if recognizing her presence. Michael crossed his arms. "I assume this isn't just a panic room." Ella turned, her expression unreadable. "This is where we change everything." A shiver ran down his spine. He had faced death before, stood on battlefields drenched in blood, saved lives with his own hands. But something about this moment, this room, felt bigger. Ella inhaló, colocando ambas palmas contra la puerta. The energy in the air thickened, pressing down on Michael's chest like an invisible weight. Slowly, the entrance slid open, revealing the chamber within. The space was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls shimmered with veins of living energy, casting a soft glow that bathed the circular chamber in shifting hues of violet and blue. At the center, an ancient pedestal rose from the floor, etched with spiraling Zephirion script, that pulsed like a beating heart. Ella stepped inside, her movements slower now, more deliberate. The bonding ritual is more than just a tradition, she said. It is the merging of power, of essence. It was once reserved for the most sacred of unions between warriors, between rulers, between soul-bound mates. Michael arched an eyebrow. And now it's going to save your life. Ella lifted her gaze to his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hesitation. Not fear, she never feared anything. But this was different. This was surrendering to something neither of them fully understood. Once we do this, there is no turning back, she warned. You will no longer be only human, and I will no longer be only Zephirion. Michael's pulse pounded. He should have hesitated, should have asked what that meant, but instead he took a step forward. Then let's get on with it, he murmured. Ella studied him for a moment longer before nodding. She stepped to the pedestal and raised her hands. A low hum filled the chamber, the ancient Zephirion language whispering through the air like the voices of long-dead ancestors. The pedestal's glow intensified, spiraling upward in golden tendrils of light. Ella extendió su mano hacia él. You must trust me. Michael took her hand without hesitation. The moment their palms met, the chamber exploded with power. A blinding pulse of energy erupted around them, wrapping them in a cocoon of light. Michael felt the force slam into his body, burning through his veins like liquid fire. His breath hitched as his knees nearly buckled, but he didn't let go. The energy wasn't just coursing through him, it was binding him to her. Visions flickered through his mind, memories that weren't his. He saw flashes of Zephirion history, ancient warriors bound by the same ritual, lovers who had shared their souls, rulers who had become legends. And then he saw her. Ella as a child, standing alone on a towering balcony, training for battle before she was old enough to wield a blade, sitting upon a throne that had never truly belonged to her. The weight of expectation, the fear of failure, the unspoken loneliness. Michael gasped as the vision shattered, replaced by something else, something real. He could feel her now. Not just physically, he could feel her. Ella's emotions, her pain, her passion, the storm that always raged inside her, the fire that had driven her to be untouchable, and beneath it all, the longing she never spoke of. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was intimate. Ella's grip tightened on his hand, and through the storm of energy, she whispered, "It's done." The energy pulsed one last time before fading. The chamber fell into silence. Michael gasped, staggering back. His skin still glowed faintly, the remnants of the ritual buzzing in his bloodstream. He looked at his hands. Something was different. He could feel it. Ella was staring at him, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. She too had changed. Her already powerful aura was even stronger, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim chamber. Michael exhaled. What the hell just happened to me? Ella's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. We are bonded now. Our fates are sealed. Michael met her gaze, his heart still hammering. There was no turning back now. And for the first time, he didn't want to. The palace stood in ruins above them. The battle had reached its climax the moment the bonding ritual was complete. When Michael and Ella emerged from the sacred chamber, they weren't the same. Michael could feel the power coursing through him, his senses heightened beyond anything human. He had always relied on his intelligence, his hands, his skill as a healer. But now, he was more than just a man of medicine. He was something else entirely. Ella had changed too. She was faster, stronger, her presence radiating an undeniable authority. Her enemies had seen the transformation, and they had feared it. Now, the battle was over. The council was dead, their forces decimated. The few who had survived had sworn loyalty to the newly ascended rulers. The throne, once a symbol of control, had been claimed. Michael stood beside Ella at the top of the palace steps, looking out at the survivors who had gathered below. They were waiting for her command. Ella levantó su barbilla, su voz resonando a través de los escombros. The old ways are finished. Zephirion will no longer be ruled by shadows and lies. This world belongs to those who have the strength to fight for it. Michael watched as the people erupted into cheers. But Ella wasn't finished. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. This was never just about me, she murmured. It was about us. Michael arched an eyebrow. Us? Ella sonrió con ironía. Don't act so surprised, Michael Carter. You sealed your fate the moment you touched me. Michael chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I kind of figured. Ella levantó una mano, y por primera vez, ella fue la que lo tocó. Her fingers traced the edge of his jaw, slow, deliberate. "You're mine now," she whispered. Michael caught her wrist, his grip firm but teasing. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Ella's eyes darkened. "Oh, I never said that." Michael leaned in slightly, his lips inches from hers. "Good." Above them, the twin moons of Zephirion shone brightly, casting light over a new era, a new kingdom, a new legend. And it was only just beginning. The sky above Zephirion was no longer filled with the smoke of battle, but with the golden light of dawn. The war was over, the traitors vanquished, and the palace stood strong once more. But the world had changed. Michael and Ella stood at the edge of the rebuilt royal terrace, looking out over the vast empire they had fought to protect. The once crumbling walls of the capital had been restored, the people no longer living in fear, but in hope. The era of treachery was over, and in its place, something new had taken root, something neither of them had expected. A reign built not on power alone, but on something far greater. Michael exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. His body still hummed with the residual effects of the bonding ritual, his senses heightened, his strength something beyond human, his connection to Ella unbreakable. He could feel her emotions even now, the weight of her responsibilities pressing against her mind. She hadn't spoken since the battle had ended, not about what had happened, not about them. Ella's red hair fluttered in the wind, her sapphire eyes fixed on the distant mountains beyond the city. She looked every bit the warrior queen she had become, powerful, untouchable, radiant. But Michael knew better now. She wasn't untouchable, not anymore. "You've been quiet," he finally said, breaking the silence between them. Ella didn't turn, but her fingers curled slightly against the cold railing. "The bonding ritual, it has made things complicated.